and I saw the game plan, a very rough scheme of the game, and I was amazed at how difficult it was, and yet at the same time how much fun it was to play.
Oh, Stephen, that couldn't be further from the truth.
Only from Atari. Made especially for systems from Atari.
What if I told you there was a video game so bad that it is single-handedly blamed for taking down an entire industry? While this isn't entirely accurate, there's no denying that it at least played somewhat of a role. I'm referring, of course, to E.T. the Extraterrestrial for the Atari 2600. Released in 1982, the game was panned by critics and consumers alike, citing its terrible gameplay and visuals and labeling it the worst video game of all time. So what happened with this game, and why is it blamed for almost taking down the entire game industry? Well, to answer that question, we need to go back to September of 1977. I want to give a major shout out to the documentary Atari Game Over. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's free on Amazon Prime Video, and it was very pivotal in the making of this video. 1977 was a significant year for technology in general. The original Star Wars premiered in theaters, Apple made a giant leap in the PC market with the Apple II home computer, and Atari released their wildly successful Atari VCS home video game console. Later renamed the Atari 2600, it popularized video games as we know them today.
You can get 9 cartridges, 187 games.
Blackjack! Oh!
This came after the success of the home version of Pong, released by Atari 2 years prior in 1975. While Pong was just an entire console dedicated to a single game, the Atari 2600 relied on game cartridges that were sold separately, much like games are today. While technically these 3 consoles came out before, not a single one of them came even close to the success of the 2600. Back then, the primary option for gaming was just getting a bunch of your friends together and hitting up the arcade. So, to save on development costs, and with the idea to bring the arcade to your own home, CEO Nolan Bushnell sought out the creation of a home entertainment system. The Atari 2600 launched with 9 games. Among these were Star Slip, Street Racer, and Indy 500. Oh yeah, just like the real thing. The Atari also saw later success when they ported over classic arcade games like Space Invaders, Asteroids, Adventure, and whoa, wait a minute. Donkey Kong and Mario Brothers. They had Nintendo games on this thing? Imagine another console today porting over Nintendo games. There would be blood in the streets, my friends. In 1981, Atari hired former Hewlett-Packard systems engineer Howard Scott Warshaw and immediately tasked him with porting over an arcade game called Star Castle. Howard, though, told his supervisor, Dennis Coble, that if he ported over the game, it would likely kinda suck. So Howard suggested he rework the entire game from the ground up, and after 9 painstaking months and a lot of testing time, he released what eventually was called Yar's Revenge.
With ion zones and evil drones, there's nothing else like Yar's Revenge, the way-out space game that's new from Atari. Who else?
The game was released in the summer of 1982 and became one of the best reviewed games for the 2600. With the success of Yar's Revenge, Howard put his name on the map in the world of game development. Atari had an even bigger project in mind, and they saw Howard as the right man for that job. Sometime in the early 1980s, movie licenses for video games started to come into play. With the success of these games taking off, Howard was entrusted to develop one of the first movie tie-in video games.
It's diabolically difficult. It's mysterious. It's never the same twice. And it's only from Atari.
While unheard of now because of cost and long development times for video games nowadays, movie tie-ins were pretty plentiful up until the 360 era, if I'm not mistaken. Most of them were unfortunately pretty mediocre, but every once in a while they would release some that were absolute bangers. Howard began development on the game adaptation of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and even met with Steven Spielberg to discuss and present the game. Raiders was eventually released in November of 1982, becoming one of the best-selling games for the 2600. However, if we go back to the summer of 1982, a series of events would kick off that would affect Howard's career as a developer, as well as Atari as a whole. On June 11th, Universal Pictures would release E.T. the Extraterrestrial in theaters across the US, becoming the highest-grossing movie of all time, surpassing Star Wars even. Shortly after, Howard received a phone call from Atari's then-president, Ray Kassar, with a rather unusual request. The request actually came from Spielberg, though. Ray said, "Howard, can you do E.T. in 5 weeks?" Howard accepted the challenge and used the opportunity to further innovate. They wanted the game to be completed in time to be released for the holidays, per Spielberg's request. Howard completed the task and was able to complete the game in the short amount of time he was given. He presented the game to Spielberg, who actually loved it. The game finally released to the public in December of '82, and while the movie was received well, the same could not be said about the video game.
All he had to do was stay on that ship, and there wouldn't be a game. And wouldn't that be better?
I apologize. Right, here it is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
The game was panned for its bad visuals and just all-around terrible gameplay. The object of the game being to find 3 parts of a phone so E.T. can, phone home, all while avoiding FBI agents and falling into pits. Atari produced somewhere between 4 to 5 million E.T. game cartridges, but only sold about 1.5 million, with well over 600,000 of those being returned. But E.T. was not the only game being lambasted by customers that year. In March of that year, Atari received a lot of flack for its highly anticipated 2600 release of Pac-Man. The game looked much worse visually than its original arcade predecessor and had terrible sound effects. So with all of those unsold and returned E.T. cartridges, what did Atari do with them?
Nearly 200 people from around the country came to find out if the rumors are true. No one knew what to expect.
For the next 31 years, an urban legend would spread across the internet, theorizing that a lot of those cartridges had been buried in a landfill somewhere in New Mexico. A lot of these claims were brushed aside until April 26, 2014.
Truckloads of that game were buried in an Alamogordo landfill back in 1983, but the video game company claims that never happened. Well, today there was a massive dig at that landfill as crews filmed for a documentary to find out the truth once and for all.
The city of Alamogordo, New Mexico, granted Fuel Industries, a Canadian entertainment company, permission to excavate the fabled Atari video game Burial. This event was the basis for filmmaker Zach Penn's documentary, Atari Game Over, released on November 20th of 2014 on Xbox Live. The excavation drew a crowd of hundreds of fans ready to see if the decades-old rumors were true. In attendance was director Zach Penn, Ready Player One author Ernest Cline, and even Howard Scott Warshaw himself. After a few hours of digging, the excavation team finally made the discovery that everyone had been waiting for: a box with an intact E.T. the Extraterrestrial game cartridge, finally laying the 30-year-old rumors to rest. Despite an estimated 700,000 cartridges being buried, only about 1,300 of them were actually recovered. Unfortunately, the failure of E.T. is often blamed for what happened the very next year.
More than 40 games in all. Odyssey. The excitement of a game. The mind of a computer.
Despite the Atari 2600 being the most popular home console at the time, other companies were cashing in on the video game craze as well.
Okay, the home entertainment sensation that's a personal computer too.
Most notably, in 1979, 4 video game developers for Atari left the company due to mistreatment and lack of recognition for their work. These guys went on and founded Activision, creating the first third-party video game development studio. Activision went on to create their own games for the 2600 that were actually good quality and enjoyable. Nowadays, they just demand your mom's credit card. Since the rise of Activision was a success, other companies saw this and followed suit, releasing their own third-party titles, but most of which were pretty poor quality. These kinds of games flooded the market and led to a lot of games just being returned or unsold, causing large stockpiles of them to just sit around for a long time and gather dust. This cost game studios and Atari a lot of money in the long run. Retailers no longer wanted anything to do with video games. All of these factors played a part in what we now know as the Great Video Game Crash of 1983, leaving the entire video game industry in a rut for the next few years. The video game industry today is massive, with the total revenue being much more than the movie and music industry combined. A lot of people like to ask the question, could another video game crash happen today? I can't say I really know. The popular consensus I have seen is that it may be possible due to the slow decline in quality of AAA games. On the bright side though, there is a pretty big silver lining with the rise of indie titles. In a lot of cases like this, there's always a saving grace. Even when the video game industry was at its lowest in 1983, 2 years later, it would have its own saving grace. Thank you everyone for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that bell. Is that even still a thing? I'm Hoosier Daddy, and I will see you next time.